Welcome to All Things Retreat Podcast. I'm Holly Porter, your host and CEO of Retreat R&R. With over 25 years of experience in designing transformative retreats, I'm here to share insights and inspiration to help you create extraordinary experiences. Whether you're a pro or just starting out, you'll find valuable ideas here. Enjoy the ride. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. We're happy that you're joining us and going to have another retreat conversation. Can you imagine on a podcast called All Things Retreat that we're talking retreats, but we don't always talk everything retreats, right? So if you've listened before, we're happy to have you back. And if you're new here, welcome. We hope that you enjoy this one and that you continue to listen to us. We are putting 2 shows out a week right now, usually only one, but just feel like we got things happening and got a lot of guests, so we got to get them out there. So today we have Kurt Uhlir. He's Chief Marketing Officer and Growth Operator, often described as the king of scaling companies. He has led teams across 6 continents and been part of more than 60 funding rounds and exits, helping companies fix the misalignment between marketing, sales, and leadership that leads to wasted spend, missed revenue targets, and stalled growth. Across multiple high-growth companies, both as an executive and board member, Kurt has used retreats as a tool to force clarity, make decisions, and align teams around what actually drives results. His focus is not on the experience itself, but on what changes after teams go back to work. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So this will be probably, I think, leaning more to the corporate type conversation, which we don't have a lot on this show. And I think it's super important because corporations that do retreats, I feel like are way ahead of the game. Don't you think?
Absolutely. It's becoming so much more important now with the shift to hybrid work and remote work, or a big portion of your team being remote as well. Or then even in the past, I used to do like quarterly sales meetings where there was always a bit of a retreat built into it. But I think people on the corporate side are now realizing, even if that's only like 5, 10, 15% of that quarterly sales meeting, we need to treat it as if it's a retreat so that we get the benefit out of it.
I agree. I think that your employees just become so much more productive. And so you were mentioning, we talked prior to the show, a recording, and we were just sharing about how you've created for a company the retreats. Let's talk about those. Let's just start out there.
Yeah, so for the last, I don't know, 7, 8 years, I've been at fully remote companies, one of which was a really big company that owns EXP Realty. And so like there, I ran 2 major divisions, a subsidiary and a big portion of EXP. And so it's like my team outside of those that where we had sold a company in EXP had never met each other. And so like part of like this thing was like Glenn was really big on everybody needs to get together, at least once a year, if not more often. And so he, you have the full authority to do that and discretionary budget. And I was like, okay, well, we need to set that up. And so part of that was figuring out obviously where to go. But the bigger part was what do I want the impact to be on the other side so that the leaders underneath me and my peers, we could start thinking about that for how we structure the event. And it wouldn't just be like a glorified vacation.
Yeah. Yeah. True. No, I love that. What do you think when you are first deciding before the retreat starts that most leaders don't think about?
What we do want from a change perspective on the other side, I find too often leaders, they're too generic actually in what they want. And especially like in hybrid or remote teams, they're like, what we just want is that social bonding that happens from people. And that's true. Like, I mentioned at EXP, the first retreat I took people on was to a place outside of Atlanta called Old Banning Mills. It's like 60 acres, this zip line like retreat. You can stay off the ground for like 7 hours,
Wow.
a more than half-mile zip line at the end of it. Not everybody did that one, but like you could go and just like get to know people in shoulder to shoulder time doing some of those activities. But what I had always found was like, okay, that's great. But the actual social interaction for remote teams or hybrid teams, you do have to have some percentage. And that's what you all need to argue about ahead of time is that is business, walking through strategy, walking through outcomes, what problems do people see? And actually that enhances the social interaction that we want at a company. Because like I joke like at companies, like I think most people get culture wrong. I think most people say culture, and when they're hiring, what they really mean is, what I want to have you and your spouse over for dinner or hang out on the weekend or go something.
Yeah.
And like, no, for me, culture at a company is like, do you have a bias towards action? Do you have healthy conflict? Do you have strong opinions and you hold them loosely? Well, you can model a ton of that virtually, But when you have the retreats, that's part of saying, I want the social bonding for people see how like we might not be friends outside of this for whatever reason, but we understand that social dynamic that you can really only get when you are in person.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Where do you think retreats typically break down and why teams don't see it until after they come back?
A couple of places. A lot of times I find they break down actually from a budget perspective, where either the retreat doesn't happen because people start to see the costs go up
Yeah.
and they're like, they don't understand and they haven't thought through because they haven't thought through the outcomes. They'll cut off the budget ahead of time,
Yeah.
or they'll cut the budget. Or what happens more often is they do not allocate enough budget, or they don't allocate enough time, because it's usually the time aspect. Like that first retreat I mentioned at EXP, like we had a 3.5 day on site, but because of travel time for some people, that was a 5 day, so that was a full business week of work. And so we knew the value of that. But at first, when I came back to the SVP in our team, and I said, so we're going to take 5 days away from doing things, and this is what we're going to do. I mean, his eyes bulged out like it was a cartoon, and he was like, "What is that? That's like 1/50th of the year is going to be a nothing but this." I was like, "Yes, but let's go back to the outcomes we expect to see afterwards from it."
Yeah.
So you can talk them off that ledge, but I find that's one of the biggest things is people just do not allocate enough budget to either time, because it does take time. It's hard to step into a corporate retreat and just be like, "Hey, let's shut down the business and let's start to like work together on different things." It's the same thing like anybody who's worked in Europe or in other countries, and I've worked in a lot, like I really respect where like, hey, I make my local teams. You have to take 2 weeks off of vacation at a time, because if you have a partner or spouse, you need like 3 to 5 days to decompress, to disconnect entirely before you could start resting. Well, there's that same thing involved for, hey, yes, we are coworkers on a retreat, but we need a day or so to get into that and kind of bump elbows, so to speak, before we can get into what should happen on it.
So when you talk about outcome, let's pretend I'm your boss, okay? And I'm like, what? You want a what? And it's going to cost how much? Like, sell me the outcome. Sell me what's going to happen if we do a retreat. Because I'm like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, I usually have a little bit more better time of it, just because outside of like doing retreats and being a corporate operator, I am the leading speaker in the world on servant leadership and high performing teams using that style of leadership. So because I'm so outcome based, when I say it, people tend to go, okay, it makes sense. But you do end up with a higher performing team. And so part of that is, for me, I think too many companies, they lead basically by authority. And because of that, it's like, do what I say, how I say it in my time frame, or you're fired. Even if they're really nice, that threat's still always there, as opposed to I'm hiring you for a business outcome. And you should, one, then be able to understand the whole company's business outcomes for this quarter, this year, and how the outcomes we want from you tie to those. Well, we should, and I do a ton of that within my virtual teams and and the hybrid teams. But like that's one of the things where I go, look, these people perform because they have an idea. It's a different thing like to step in person, especially where you have a retreat to break things up, and we can push much more on stress testing. Do people actually understand the business outcomes that they're wanting, or that we're wanting from them and from the company? And if not, that's us on leaders to come back. And when we nail that, we may get an extra 20 to 50% improvement in efficiency and results from those people. And like, I think one of the best ways to do that is having peers on my team, and sometimes, groups of people do kind of that questioning.
Yeah.
And I found that psychologically, anything on Zoom, anything on Slack video, or anything, we happen to use like this tool called Roam for my company right now. If I hand that off to another leader to step in, on virtual, it feels like an interrogation. Tell me what you do. Tell me how that's the business out. Like, it feels different than even the same conversation takes place in person, especially after stepping off of a group trip to the Anne Frank Museum in Amsterdam, or ziplining or something. It's a different, psychological break at that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. How do you structure a retreat so it actually changes behavior instead of just creating temporary energy?
I personally always look for things that are going to test people. I mentioned like zip lining. There's some people that will go zip lining. My wife is not one of those after she's done it once. She doesn't even want to get off the ground. But we're going to look for things like that. But I'm going to look for things that's going to push you from a mental perspective or a physical perspective, or both. and structure it in ways about, hey, for the people that are more extreme in any of those and want the
Yeah.
challenge, you can do that, but it's not going to feel left out because there'll be like a level one that everybody can do and feel comfortable with. Whether that's like in the case of there, we had a high angle kind of like walk through like obstacle course, but we structured it so like about a third of the people chose to stay on the ground, but they like we gave them instruction for being supportive of their team members that were up there, both sometimes cracking jokes and sometimes pushing them so that they didn't feel left out from it. And so I'm going to look for something that's both physically challenging and psychologically challenging for it. And I'm going to push that. I'm going to push some of that initially, almost as they hit the ground. They'll have 4 to 5 hours of just kind of social interaction as people get there, but we're going to step in and do something like that
Yeah.
or something interactive. I mentioned like the Anne Frank Museum in Amsterdam. That was something that I did for some of my teams in Europe where we came together. And like that was our first day. Hey, it is a mental shift. You're going back in history. What does that look like? So that we had some common in-person bonding before we step into some work stuff the next day. And then you go back into some more extreme and physical pushing the next time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. When you design or participate in a retreat for a company, what are the non-negotiables that must be included?
They have to, the people that are there have to be disconnected from work. And so because most companies don't actually do that. They want the sales team, you still have to respond to things. The rare exceptions are like, hey, I took an entire subsidiary to that retreat at Old Banding Mills where my entire customer success team came. Well, that means these are people that do support tickets. And we were a company that you could pick up phone calls. So they did have to structure, like almost like being on Christmas, like who is the one person for each one of these little blocks that would still be available for minimal support time. And we let people know that ahead of time. Sales was the same way. And so that's a non-negotiable for me. Another one is, I said, there have to be activities, structured activities. I find too often people for corporate side, they do things unstructured, which usually leads to usually leads to a lot of drinking, a lot of bad behavior, things that HR has to deal with, or it just doesn't lead to the benefit on the other side because some people want to hang out and some people want to go do something. And so you separate the groups, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do, but to bring you together. And then the third thing is everybody for me gets a per diem, no matter where we're at, that you get to spend on things just for you. I'll go back to the thing like at Old Banding Mills. It was built into the per price. We had it for everything. So everybody had $100 to basically buy on anything they wanted in the store. And so some people bought candy bars, some people bought mugs. My wife's a potter, so it's like I don't need another mug. I have them. Some people bought mugs, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and whatnot. And because like I want it to also be memorable for them when they're leaving. And so because of that, like, hey, it's not a big deal to bake an extra $50, $100, $200 into that per
Right.
person price once you're already there for the retreat. But that's something that so many, I find, the accounting side or sometimes the CEO, they're hard on. They're like, wait a second, you're going to spend an extra $5,000 across the team, an extra 20 grand
Yeah.
across this team. Yeah, because it's a really small thing compared to what we spend overall for these people. Let them take home a sweatshirt if they want, so they remember the time with their peers.
Right. Yeah, that you can't put a price on the memory for sure.
Right.
I love that. What would you say is the ideal number of days for maybe somebody listening to us that is thinking about doing something more corporate? What days for the retreat for attendees? Like what would you say is that magical day number?
2.5 to 3.5 days, I feel like is kind of my magical sweet spot because you have to factor in the travel time.
Yeah.
If you have, I'd say more than like maybe 15 to 20% traveling, I'm almost always going to opt for that 3.5 days. And then if it's drivable for people, especially like you're all inside in, Utah or so, wherever you're at,
Yeah.
then like by all means, it can be a shorter time frame. That it's 45 minutes away. Everybody drive to it. It's good.
Right. Yeah. And okay. What do you think there's some of the biggest mistakes companies make when planning leadership or team retreats?
They do opt for too often for it to be much more social, and they do not opt for how do we challenge our team or the leadership team, especially if it's a leadership
Yeah.
retreat, for healthy conflict. I say healthy conflict is there's no way to have, be in a relationship with people, personal at work, without there being conflict. And so like virtual is hard. Sometimes in person, when you have a quarterly number and you're discussing something, that's hard. And so when you have the benefit and the change of venue from a corporate retreat, that's when the best time to actually push a little bit more extreme in confrontational topics or change experience, or even just like mind games you can play in a structured perspective. But you have to plan for that ahead of time. And they usually don't do that. They kind of set aside time, but they haven't intentionally gone through and said, gosh, we keep having these 4 issues whenever they come up. Okay, then 2 to 4 of those issues should be primarily what you cover at your retreat. And you should plan for that ahead of time. And how do you do that in a way so it's not just going to be the same, hey, we should probably talk about how you think the product should go this way and I think the product should go this way. No, you need a little more thought about it ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many different activities you can do that gamifying things, I think, is so huge. And retreats is a great place to do that. If a company was saying, we don't have time for a retreat, what would you say to them?
I thought you wanted to grow your company or you must enjoy burning money. I just say that of like, when I look back at things, how we, so much of how we have saved hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars came from ideas that could have come up and may have come up at some point through normal working conversation, but they came up from our personal interaction where we threw out the problem, because usually I'll structure days where we have like an hour or two of some company stuff and then we go do activities. An hour or two of company stuff, we go do some activities. And the value doesn't actually come from the in-person corporate time. The ideas that come, we kind of seed that in your mind. And then when you're out on the zip line, when you're visiting a museum, when you're doing a walking tour, you're riding segways, that's when somebody goes, oh, you mentioned this before. That makes me think. So that's part of why I see the value for things. And I point that out to people. It's useful both when you've done them yourselves or you've been part of them successful. Now, a lot of people from that team that I mentioned, like at EXP, we've all now gone to other companies and people come back and be like, hey, I'm now setting up a corporate retreat for our 15-person team, a 30-person team here. Like, and can I run past my agenda to you? Sure, happy to. But they wouldn't have done that if they had not been on a successful retreat.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it helps. And people are getting it a little bit more than they used to. Retreats aren't going anywhere. We're in a $226 billion industry in 2024, expected to grow to 363 by 2029. So it's not going away, people. Embrace
Right.
it, right?
Well, and it's shifting because I think in the past, from a corporate perspective, whether small SMBs or up to Salesforce kind of size organizations, they used to treat major industry conferences as corporate retreats, and
Yeah.
there was a lot of benefit for that. But like if you look at the numbers for a typical conference, like cities, Las Vegas, Chicago, LA, the number of conferences or the attendance in those conferences has gone way down because at the board level, we've evaluated and said, gosh, the conferences that way, because we've shifted so much how we do work, are not nearly as valuable. I mean, Los Angeles is hemorrhaging for it right now. And so, well, if you got that benefit before, a lot of times where it was unstructured or maybe a little structured, you now realize that was valuable and you're having to replace it. So I think that's actually like more of a shifting where people, I think wisely, are saying, instead of treating it like we're going to the Consumer Electronics Show, we need to have a separate retreat for it, and you plan for that differently, and you can budget for it differently as well.
Yeah. Yeah. How can retreat leaders better position themselves to serve high level executives and growth stage companies?
Net weave with them, don't network. I just say that in terms of the reason I think like networking, and I'm friends with a gentleman, Bob Littell, who wrote this book back in the 70s, is like, we've all been somewhere where somebody hands you the business card and you can tell when they get yours, they virtually go, well, Holly won't be important to me. And they kind of virtually throw it away. I've had one person actually like, yep, like they dropped my card. And I was like, well, that's ended this relationship. But the net weaving approach says, look, everybody that you meet, like you seek to add value to them. And when you do that, like I'm going to intentionally work with you. Like you're going to have something like a personal CRM. I have a work CRM, both for the main company and my own, like, because I still do some executive coaching. And I use HubSpot for that because there's a sales pipeline. But my main network, I use a tool called Dex, DEX. And there is no pipeline. And so instead, I'm going in there both personal connections and work connections. And I'm saying, how often do I want to stay in touch with Holly? Every 3 months, every 6 months. It monitors everything from WhatsApp to email to text message. And I also tag things in there pretty proficiently so that when something comes up about retreats, it's an easy way for me to go, who should I go send that to?
Yeah.
Like when you approach your relationships with that, you then stay in touch with somebody like me. And part of that then is I start putting it into my thinking. You can send me the value from a company you just had and not selling, but say, hey, when you're ready for one of these, we just did this with a company kind of in your space or similar size wise. Let me know if you're even thinking about it. Like that's how it's not a sales relationship. I'm going to come back to you then as somebody who helps manage and run retreats. I'm going to come to you when I start thinking about it before I go to my team and go, I'm going to spend X dollars and X time on on a retreat. I'm going to bring you into that ahead of time, and usually start to say here's the problems I'm having on my team. Do you have ideas for where we could go? Like from my side, it is really hard to find venues. Often I will pick things that are either close to me or that's just on my to-do list that hey, I will have a corporate retreat in the next 2 years at a dude ranch. Because that's what I want to do. I want to do that. And my wife's not going to go with me. So I'll have a corporate retreat for either my division or the whole company at a dude ranch somewhere in the West. Well, what are the best activities that would be better than that you probably have off your cuff? That's how anybody that manages retreats should be staying in touch with somebody like me.
Yeah.
So that, hey, we bring you into our thinking and then you've already won the deal. There's no RFP at that point. There's no vetting of other people. You are my person.
I love it. Yeah, that's so good. Okay. For a second, we're going to do some rapid fire here. These are just questions, top of mind answers. No answer is incorrect. Beach retreat or mountain retreat?
Mountain retreat.
Sunrise or late night strategy sessions?
Late night.
Whiteboard or slide deck?
Whiteboard.
Biggest growth killer, poor leadership or poor communication?
Poor leadership.
One word that defines a great team?
Service.
Coffee or green juice?
Coffee.
Most underrated part of a retreat?
The arrival.
If you could host a retreat anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Costa Rica.
Somewhere
we could go see monkeys as well.
Yeah, yes, you can. Well, okay, Kurt, if somebody wants to get hold of you, we will put your information in the show notes and go back there. But what is the best way to reach?
My personal website, you can find out a lot about me, but it'll splinter you off to anywhere else that you may want to know.
I love it. Okay. Well, this was exciting, a little different conversation that I love. So you people that are listening, thinking in that more corporate-y mindset. Yeah. And it sounds like you do some consultation for these kinds of things with people, right?
Usually unofficial on the retreat side, but I usually have slots for somewhere between 1 and 3 executives that I'm coaching them things. And this will always be one of the things we're going to coach them through.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, thanks for coming on the show today and being a guest and being a great guest. And you can reach out to Kurt on the show notes there. So thanks, everybody. Bye for now. Thanks for joining us on this episode of All Things Retreat. We hope you're leaving with new ideas, fresh inspiration, and the motivation to take your retreats to the next level. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps us grow and reach more retreat leaders like you. And if you have any questions, topics you'd like us to cover, or just want to say hello, send us an email at info@weretreatrnr.com. Follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all the latest updates. Until next time, remember, great retreats start with great intentions. Let's make them extraordinary, one step at a time. Thinking about hosting a retreat? Before you dive in, let's make sure you're really ready. Grab your free Are You Retreat Ready checklist and find out if you've got everything in place, from your purpose and pricing to your audience and agenda. Don't guess, get clear. This quick checklist will show you exactly where you stand and what you need to make your retreat a success. Click the link below in the show notes to grab your gift and take the first step toward hosting with confidence.